It was April 26, 1945. The war in Europe was drawing to a brutal close, but inside the U.S. 2nd Cavalry Group's headquarters, chaos still reigned. Colonel Charles Reed, bone-weary and dust-caked, just wanted to go home. Then his scouts brought in a most unusual prisoner, a German Luftwaffe intelligence officer under a white flag, carrying a desperate plea from a German general. This wasn't about surrender, it was a cry for help. "Colonel," the German officer began, his voice laced with urgency, "we have a problem. In the town of Hostau, there are hundreds of prisoners of war. But there is something else. There are the horses." Reed's brow furrowed. "Horses?" "Yes," the German confirmed, "the Lipizzaner stallions, the royal horses of Vienna, the most beautiful animals in the world. Hitler stole them, brought them here to breed a master race of horses." The officer's eyes widened with terror. "The Russians are coming, Colonel. They are starving. They don't care about art. They don't care about history. If they find the horses, they will shoot them. They will turn the finest animals in Europe into soup." Colonel Reed knew this sounded insane, risking American lives for horses, but he also knew his boss, General George S. Patton. Patton was a cavalryman to his core, a man who famously loved horses more than most humans. Reed picked up the radio and called Patton's headquarters. "General," he reported, "we have a situation, a chance to steal Hitler's prize stallions before the Russians eat them. But we have to attack a German SS unit to do it." A silence stretched across the line, then Patton's gruff voice crackled back, "Get them, make it quick, and don't lose a single horse." This was the genesis of Operation Cowboy, the only time in World War II when the US Army fought a battle not for land, not for freedom, but to save the world's most famous horses. To understand Patton's audacious decision, one must grasp the significance of these animals, the Lipizzaners. These are the magnificent white dancing horses of Vienna, symbols of European royalty for 400 years. Born dark, they gradually turn pure white. They are rare, intelligent, and truly majestic. In 1945, they were refugees. Adolf Hitler and his stud farm director, Gustav Rau, had systematically stolen them from Vienna, Yugoslavia, and Italy, gathering nearly 400 of these equine treasures at a secret farm in Hostau, Czechoslovakia. Hitler envisioned a master race of horses, just as he did humans, for his 1,000-year Reich. Now these exquisite animals were trapped in a barn near the Czech border. From the east, the Red Army was closing in. Soviet soldiers, having marched 2,000 miles, were desperately hungry. Their own horses had long since been consumed. To a starving Russian soldier, a Lipizzaner stallion wasn't a work of art. It was 1,000 pounds of meat. The German caretakers at the farm, led by Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Rudowski, were paralyzed with fear. They adored the horses and knew the stable would become a slaughterhouse upon the Russians' arrival. Their only hope lay with the Americans, their current enemies, yet their only potential saviors. Colonel Charles Reed, commander of the U.S. 2nd Cavalry, was, fittingly, a horseman himself. A competitive rider before the war, he understood the profound stakes. With Patton's green light, he began planning the rescue. It was officially a task force, but the soldiers dubbed it Operation Cowboy, because trucks wouldn't suffice for such a large number of horses. They'd have to ride them out, like a Wild West cattle drive in the middle of a war zone. Reed assembled his team, the 42nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, a platoon of light tanks, and, unusually, German POWs. He armed these surrendered German soldiers and asked for their help in saving the horses. They agreed. For one extraordinary day, Americans and the Wehrmacht were allies. Their enemy, the fanatical Waffen-SS guarding Hostau, ordered to fight to the death, indifferent to the horses' fate. April 28, 1945. Dawn broke as the American task force rolled toward Hostau. M8. Greyhound armored cars, Stuart light tanks, and machine gun-mounted jeeps crashed through German border defenses, racing down country roads. The distant rumble of Soviet artillery served as a stark reminder of their dwindling time. As they neared the stud farm, SS troops unleashed machine gun fire, bullets pinging off American armor. Colonel Reed ordered his tanks to retaliate, with a crucial caveat: take them out, but watch the barn. Don't hit the barn. It was a surgical battle, Eliminate the SS guards without harming the precious cargo inside. A tank shell obliterated the SS barracks, scattering the survivors into the woods, outnumbered and outmatched. The Americans smashed through the gates. Colonel Reed leaped from his jeep and sprinted to the stables, flinging open the doors. Inside, hundreds of white horses stood in the shadows, their coats gleaming, watching the soldiers with wide, intelligent eyes. The German caretakers emerged, hands raised not in surrender, but in profound relief. "Thank God," one whispered. "You made it." But the mission was far from over. Getting in was the easy part. Getting out with 400 horses, with both Russians and SS closing in, was the true challenge. Reed consulted his map. Hostau was deep within the Soviet zone, territory designated to the Russians by the Yalta Agreement. If Soviet commanders discovered Americans stealing their prize, it could spark a diplomatic incident, or worse, a firefight. Reed knew he had to move fast, but you can't rush a herd of horses, especially pregnant mares and newborn foals. Many Lipizzanas had just given birth, their foals only days old, too fragile to walk 30 miles to American lines. Reed made a snap decision: find trucks. Any trucks, German farm wagons, to load the baby horses. The mothers and stallions would have to walk. It was a logistical nightmare, herding hundreds of high-strung, incredibly valuable horses through a war-torn countryside. Tanks in front, tanks in back, and in the middle, a living river of white horses trotting down the road. As the convoy prepared to depart, a cloud of dust appeared on the eastern horizon. It wasn't the SS, it was a Soviet reconnaissance unit. A T-34 tank commander jumped out, glaring at the horses and the Americans, his face etched with anger. "What are you doing?" the Russian demanded. "This is Soviet territory. These horses are Soviet property." Colonel Reed stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. He had no orders to fight the Russians, but he had Patton's order. "Don't lose a single horse." He bluffed. "We are conducting a special operation authorized by Supreme Headquarters. These animals are being relocated for medical reasons." It was a bold lie. The Russian commander assessed the American tanks, counted the guns, then glanced at his own smaller force. He spat on the ground. "Take them," he grumbled, "but you better run. My division is coming behind me." The Russians let them go, a calculated decision to avoid World War III over horses. The journey back to Bavaria was surreal. American GIs, many from Texas and Oklahoma farms, suddenly became cowboys again. They rode the horses, herded them with jeeps. German POWs rode alongside. For a brief, fleeting moment, the war evaporated. There were no Nazis, no allies, just men and horses striving for survival. Obstacles still emerged. At one point, the SS attempted an ambush. A firefight erupted, sending the horses into a panic, hooves flashing. Soldiers battled Germans with one hand and calmed the horses with the other. A few men were lost, but the herd was protected. Soldiers formed a living wall around the animals, taking bullets meant for the stallions. Why such dedication? One soldier later wrote in his diary, "We had seen so much death, so much ugliness. The concentration camps, the ruined cities. These horses, they were beautiful. They were pure. Saving them felt like saving a piece of our own humanity." Finally, they crossed into Bavaria, safe behind American lines. General Patton arrived to inspect his prize, striding into the temporary corral in his iconic riding breeches and high boots. Patton, a hard man who had slapped soldiers and sent men to their deaths, softened visibly at the sight of the Lipizzanas. He approached the lead stallion, a magnificent white beast named Pluto Theodorosta. The horse bowed its head, and Patton gently stroked its neck. He turned to Colonel Alois Podhajski, the Austrian director of the Spanish riding school, who had initially sought Patton's protection. Podhajski organized an impromptu performance in a muddy field. The white horses performed their famous airs above the ground, leaping, dancing, a ballet of power and grace. Patton watched, mesmerized. He turned to his aide. "In a world of such horror, it is good to know that something this beautiful still exists." He issued a directive: "These horses are now wards of the US Army. No one touches them, not the Russians, not the politicians. They are under my protection." Operation Cowboy was an unqualified success. They saved 375 Lipizzaner horses and hundreds of Allied POWs from the camp. If Patton hadn't acted, the Lipizzaner breed would likely be extinct today. Every Lipizzaner horse performing in Vienna, competing in the Olympics, or appearing in movies is a descendant of the horses Patton saved. The Spanish riding school in Vienna still stands, and within its hallowed halls, you won't find a portrait of an Austrian emperor, but one of an American general, George S. Patton. The man who epitomized war is honored for saving the art of peace. The story of the Lipizzaners is a fascinating footnote in the sprawling history of World War II, yet it reveals something crucial about George Patton. He was a complex figure who believed in vanquishing the enemy, but also in preserving culture. He despised the Russians, viewing them as destroyers of civilization. By saving these horses, he believed he was saving civilization itself.